Yeah, so hi, I'm George. I'm from England, so apologies for that. Thought I'd just get it out of the way to start with. Yeah, so my talk's about test-driven development, which I know everyone's so excited about. Somewhat controversial in games, but let's see how we go. So the purpose of this talk is to try and introduce test-driven development, talk about some of my experiences, hopefully give you lovely people something to think about. So what is test-driven development? So that's where we define the criteria up front in order to be able to test functionality. And there's two common ways we can do that. We can use code to test things, or we can write test cases to test things. Now, TDD isn't a silver bullet. It's not going to come in and add 30 points to your team's velocity. But it's also not something that should make your project harder. Really, as when you change anything about the project, you add something new to the tech stack, or you have a new starter, for example, there's an implicit cost into that. But really, TDD shouldn't make your project harder. It's also not an all or nothing solution. Really, you can take as much or as little as you want away from this talk, but really, if you think it can help, then you should try and include it. So, some of my experiences with TDD in the games industry, some of the complaints are we're iterating too quickly, or it limits creativity, the requirements are too fluid, or there's no actual fixed requirements at all. It takes time away from engineering and we can't meet our deadlines as it is, or there's physically no quantitative requirements, it's all qualitative, or this doesn't feel right, or add more juice. So let's look at how we actually develop things. So usually we start off with an idea or some sort of ticket. There's then a development process, and then we go through a period of testing. So if we start off with the idea phase, something really simple is that we can add in acceptance criteria onto our ticket, and really that makes it really clear what it is we're trying to achieve when that work has been completed. We can use language like, as a user, I expect this to happen. So, for example, I can't walk through walls, or I can unlock a door when I've got a key. We can then use that acceptance criteria in both the development phase and the testing phase to verify that we're happy with the work that's being, engineered or designed or developed or tested or whatever. In the developer phase, we can write unit tests to verify that the data transformations are correct. If we pass in X, do we actually get Y out? These can be temporary or part of a big test suite in order to guard against regressions. We can also write scripts and debugging tools to help facilitate this. And then, of course, when we come to testing, we can use manual test cases and then come back and automate them later, should we think that that's a long time process that really we could do with saving some time on. And, of course, the acceptance criteria we defined at the start can be used to actually help facilitate that stuff. We can then go one step further and add soak tests or nightly builds if we think that'll add value to the project. And then something really simple like steps to reproduce, that in itself is testing criteria we use to verify if the thing's been fixed or is working as we expect. So some examples of things that I've used in the past is when I was having to write a function to calculate the difference in time in months. If you create test cases up front, you can then use these to test the functionality is working as you're iterating through it. So you can compare the answer that you get out of it with answer that you expect. Equally, I've spent a lot of time working with Python and Unreal. I think somebody else brought that up earlier on, so maybe we should have a chat afterwards. But we used it for building asset validators to look at the assets that we'd actually got in our levels, to look at the try count, to look at if the level of detail things have been set up correctly, the material slots have been assigned. But you can go, again, one step further and actually build an asset importer to take the raw asset file and bring that into Unreal. Sorry, guys. So that really what that means is the artist is then freed up to just look at the placement of the art assets rather than working out if everything's been set up correctly. We've talked about manual and automated test cases, but really with this stuff, it's so important that you try and update them as you're going. Whenever the code changes, you should also try and update the tests, because really that safeguards against regressions, and it gives you that confidence both as producers and project managers, but also developers that are looking after and building the thing, that you've got that confidence in your project so you can keep then adding more stuff to it. It's about building that solid foundation. We can build really fancy things with command line integration and a million arguments, but really, Sometimes all you need is just a script that's going to fire macros at your project. What happens if you spam the A button, or if you try and run through a wall or something like that? And debugging tools can play a big part of that. So this is another slide to do with the concept we talked about, projects moving too fast. So it's really important to have feature or project or team reviews so you can break down what's working well and what's not. And then those things that aren't working so well, they then become the criteria for the subsequent talk, right? So you can measure your progress if things are getting better. But also trying to make sure you know what it is you're trying to achieve. I don't really want to play that link there. I just thought it was a really good video from GDC this year to do with team playtesting. And the team at, I think they were EA, that were working on the skate game, were organizing team testing to look at features specifically, as well as just general playing and working out if things were working or not, and working on that feedback together. And that was my talk. So if anybody's got any questions on TDD, please come find me afterwards. Thanks everybody.